this new edition, filling positions. Looking at the void in myself and feeling what's missing. Better watch the way you going, better go in the right direction. In the moment you stressing, but you gon' be counting blessings. And I know that for certain. Keep on working, open curtains, haters swerving, cause they ain't ready for your final version. Whoa. I'm never gonna give up. Fall down, I just gotta get up, yeah. Cause this is my road. Let's camera action, I'm ready to go. I'm never gonna give up.
You're listening to the Tom Ficklin Show on WNHHLP 103.5 FM, your home for community radio.
Good morning, everyone. I am Jonathan Q. Berryman, and I am filling in for the wonderful Tom Ficklin this morning. I thank Tom for inviting me to host this morning's show in his absence, and I wish him a timely and productive return to literally being able to run on. This morning, I want to acknowledge and celebrate Yale University's investment in Black academic talent in the field of music in its recent appointment of 3 professors, Professor Albert R. Lee, Professor Braxton D. Shelley, and Professor Ty Murray. I am delighted to welcome 2 of the appointees this morning, Professor Lee and Professor Shelley, to the Tom Ficklin Radio Show. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Professor Lee has been appointed by the Yale School of Music as its first Director of Equity, Belonging, and Student Life. Professor Shelley has been appointed as a tenured Associate Professor of Music, of Sacred Music, and of Divinity at the Yale School of Music, Yale Divinity School, and the Institute of Sacred Music. I thank both of you for agreeing to be featured as the focus of this morning's conversation. In thinking about the premise of today's show, it is often said that relationships matter. Yet establishing relationships that positively matter remains elusive for many. I contend that part of this elusiveness rests in our need as individuals and as a community to make room for people to tell their stories and to have their stories heard, understood, and respected. Oftentimes we know people by face or by title, professor, doctor, bishop, and we rarely get an opportunity to hear their stories unpacked so that our assumptions and preconceived notions about who they are can be reconciled more closely with the truth, so that others understand us as people, not just as faces and titles. This morning's show is dedicated to providing space for Professor Lee and Professor Shelley to help us understand their truth as people, as we welcome them to the New Haven community. With that in mind, I will be asking some open-ended questions to help us to get to know them better. And question 1, and I'll let you all decide who's going to answer first, since we did not get a chance to toss coins. Describe the musical and academic talent, Describe the musical and academic highlights of your journey that have led you to where you are today.
Sure, let me first thank you, Jonathan, for the invitation, the opportunity to be with you and to get to know you and the New Haven community a bit better. I had the opportunity at my previous institution, school that won't be named in Cambridge, Massachusetts, to have Richard Smallwood come do a masterclass and performance with students of mine and folks at in the Kumbha Singers at Harvard, the gospel choir from BU, and the gospel choir from Tufts. And I had to figure out how to preface the last song. They all did one of his songs. We had a conversation interspersed over the 2 hours, and they came together, all 3 choirs, to sing Total Praise. And as I was racking my brain to figure out how to set it up, I remembered one of my earliest musical experiences was a choir workshop in like the mid-90s, probably 96 or 97, when I heard Total Praise for the first time. I was very young. I might have been 7 years old. but I remembered the vamp, the walk up to that, "You are the source of my strength, you are the strength of my life." I remembered how it took the place. And in so many ways, I've been stuck on little musical moments like that, where a sound and communities of belief collide in meaningful ways, and trying then to translate what for many goes without saying into language that the Academy can read and respect. So I guess for highlights, that has to be near the top. And I think in many respects, what I hope to do in New Haven and at Yale is to further institutionalize that work of calling adequate scholarly attention to the music of the Black church, both music in the Black church and the Black church's influence on a host of musical traditions, confessional and commercial, local and global. And then I'll do that animated by these little moments.
So, Professor Shelley, are you a gospel musician?
I am, sometimes. It's
would you call yourself that?
I definitely would. It's just a joke about how being a musician, minister, academician means, dividing your time and getting to do less of any one than you might want to do. But I compose and play. I've been playing in church since I was, 8 years old. I joke that in the military, you could retire after 20 years. And so I crossed my 20-year mark several years ago. And so I joke that I'm retired from some things, but I love nothing more than working with the choir, that moment when the choir goes from not having a clue what the song is to having it kind of lock in, and all of a sudden they start to like it, start to love it, start to be prepared to minister it. I've done a fair amount of compositional work. The recording choir, a group of friends of mine from across the country, I call them a testimony, and we've had music done at the Hampton Ministers Conference, the Gospel Music Workshop of America, and other conferences, National Convention of Gospel Choirs, the Dorsey Convention also.
So where did that get started? You've done all these wonderful things. Where did that come from?
I don't know if I could locate it in any single moment. I think I was writing music when I was in middle school and high school. And I had, the distinction of being the minister of music. So if I wanted to, I could do a song that I wrote, and then the choir had to sing it because I was in charge.
What kind of church was this?
I grew up in the Missionary Baptist Church. I have since then worked across the full gamut of Black churches, High Baptist, Low Baptist, Methodist, Pentecostal, and I'm sure I'm forgetting some some Reformation that I have served. But basically, I started composing relatively young, and when I got to undergrad, I just sort of really dug into it. I did my first recording my senior year of college, and I started that summer doing new music seminars at the sort of major gospel and church conferences. And I continued. I had planned to record another CD in May of 2020. We bought the tickets and everything. And then, of course, COVID shut us down. So it is the thing I'm most looking forward to reviving as soon as it becomes safe to do so.
Sounds good. And one more question in this vein. So give us your academic credentials, because people want to know. I know they could Google it, but you might as well tell them.
Okay. Well, I went to Baskerville Elementary School.
In where?
In Rocky Mount, North Carolina. Susie C. Baskerville. elementary school. I graduated, however, we moved from Edgecombe, Nash County to Wake County when I was in high school. So I graduated from Garner Magnet High School. I went to Duke and studied music and history. And I was one course short of a minor in religion. It's interesting how even then I was kind of stuck in this world that I haven't been able to escape. And then I went to the University of Chicago for graduate school. I got a PhD there in the history and theory of music. And while I was there, I was insane. And so I also got a Master of Divinity while I wrote my dissertation. I earned a Master of Divinity at the University of Chicago's Divinity School. It was a great experience, profoundly transformative, and I do not recommend doing 2 graduate degrees at the same time. I learned from my mistakes, even if they seem to have worked out. And so then I graduated in 2017, my PhD, and I joined the faculty at Harvard. And I was there until Yale called me a little while ago.
All right. So from Rocky Mount to New Haven, that's quite a journey. And you will find that North Carolina connection to be very helpful here in New Haven.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yes. This is a new North Carolina is all over New Haven.
Okay, that's good. Well, North Carolina people, find me. I'm on Facebook. Messages, because I need to find some people. All right.
And some barbecue.
Yes, and let's be transported Tar Heels. Okay.
Professor Lee, same question. Describe the musical and academic highlights of your journey that have led you to where you are today.
First of all, I have to say, Jonathan, thank you so much for this invitation. Professor Shelley, welcome to New Haven. I'm looking forward to meeting you. So many people have reached out to me to tell me about you and trying to find out if I already knew you and how I didn't know you, because you are clearly the man. I'm excited to be named among you in this newest endeavor in both of our lives. Jonathan, to answer the question, but in all seriousness, there are so many both musical and academic experiences that have shaped where I am right now. And I think the most beautiful thing is so many of those musical experiences happened right here in New Haven. Happened for me at a young age, right in and around my hometown. I grew up as a member of St. Paul Union American Methodist Episcopal Church on the corner of Chapel and Dwight Street here in New Haven. And my musical experience growing up was that of a rather typical traditional Methodist church where we had a gospel choir and we had a senior choir and we had a male chorus and we sang hymns and we sang anthems, and everything was present in the musical experience. And so what that gave me was an understanding of music that was extremely broad growing up. And what I really loved was actually not what I was actually good at. Growing up, gospel music was my entire world. You could not, if there was a concert going on, and I grew up in a time in New Haven where there was always a concert going on someplace, and just always a concert, I was there. That's what was important to me. That was my musical lifeblood. What I discovered was, as a musician myself, as an artist myself, as a vocalist, that where my gifts and my talent and my sensibility lied was much more on the classical side. And so I joined the New Haven Chorale my senior year in high school, and that's where I really began exposure in a tangible way to classical music, and went on to the University of Connecticut to do a bachelor's degree. Met a wonderful couple, Donald and Virginia Kyle, who have both since gone on to glory, but they are my classical parents in a sense. They reared me. They helped me kind of see a brand new world, a very different world, and in a sense, the rest is history. One particular experience that is both New Haven related and specifically Yale related was a night in October of 1997. I was a senior at UConn. I'd come into town to see a concert at Woolsey Hall. And the concert, the recital was being given by none other than the great Leontine Price. And she sang a selection on that concert that was a song by a woman by the name of Margaret Bonds. and the text was Langston Hughes, and it was the song Minstrel Man. And that night, I had a bit of a happening sitting in that concert where, for the first time, as much as I loved classical music, I didn't always feel connected to it. And that was the moment that I felt connected to it in a way that was so much more tangible than anything else. That I could be a Black person and be a classical singer and sing about my experiences in this classical way. I had not experienced that outside of spirituals up until that point. And so, I would say that, even though I wasn't a student at Yale, that opportunity that Yale presented was absolutely instrumental in setting me up on a journey that has been pretty spectacular. I graduated from UConn that year, later in that academic year. Went on to Juilliard to do a master's in vocal performance. Spent 8 years singing full time and teaching a little bit here and there. And then when the economy tanked in 2008, I went back to school in 2009 and did a doctorate of music and vocal performance at Florida State. And accepted a faculty appointment at the University of Nevada, Reno, and was there for 9 years. And now find myself here in New Haven. The beautiful thing about life has been, it's kind of the serendipity of coming home, but also the serendipity of musically coming home. I find myself doing a broader swath of musical genres now than at any point in my career. And I'm loving the challenge of revisiting some more sort of popularly influenced classical music that forces me to be creative, that forces me to, in a sense, check some of my technical training at the door and be a little more free. It's not necessarily where I like to live, but I love to be challenged. So I'm still growing, I'm still becoming, forward to this next journey, that's part of the journey. Yeah.
So you grew up in church. Interesting that both of you grew up in church. Both of you are familiar with gospel music, right? Grew up around gospel, grew up probably around a whole lot of music. And out of that church experience, we have two professors, one focusing on the academic side of gospel and one in classical. So if you all are like me, in your experience, it was always a question, a conundrum, right? If you grew up with the senior choir on one side and the gospel choir on the other, that was my experience. Now we see this merger of it's possible to be in a same institution and to produce high art on the gospel side and on the classical side. And I think that's something that we are at a point now where we're able to celebrate even more. And I don't take it lightly that Yale has called both of you, right? So we have this high musical artistic talent, really, that was founded in the Black church and that is still representative of all of the things that the Black church can do. So part of my research looks at how do we get more Black musicians, right? So many of the questions I'm asking you are founded in that. Your formation, how in the world did this happen? We get these people who are talented and academic. So that's what that question, the root of that question was. I have another question that I did not submit to you all in advance. What is something that you think that people need to know about you right away in order to be successful in connecting with who you are? Let me read it again. What is something that you think that people need to know about you right away in order to be successful in connecting with who you are? What's going to get them brownie points from day one?
I'll answer that. And I'll say it this way, I think it is, for me, it is very, very important that in spaces where I'm going to be successful, that I be allowed to be my whole self and bring my whole self to the table. So one way to be successful in working with me is to refrain from boxing me in to your smaller preconceived notions of who you think I am. So I would say to people, take the time to actually experience me before, sort of making a judgment call about what you think. Because every time you sort of settle on something, you'll discover another facet of it.
That's a hard question. I guess if I had to answer it, I would just say, be bold and make the approach. I think sometimes folks get intimidated by, titles and so forth. And for me, those things are very, very, very important and very insignificant at the same time. Tenured associate professor of music of sacred, all that, that can sound really quite something. And I think I don't walk around the world thinking about the title. I walk around the world thinking about the work. And the work is inseparable from the people who are doing it, especially, not just the research component, because everything I do is Black churchy somehow, but especially the program that I aim to build. It is about the people. It is about the places. It is about the practices. And so what I would say is, if there's something to help be successful, it's to just, assume that I'm going to be accessible in the community and every way I can. And that, my goal is to use Yale to do good, not to be satisfied at Yale, to park in a perch, but to really get to work, and that means getting to know people. And since I'm the stranger, I will need some invitations, some reachings out, and I promise, if you call, I'll answer. And if you invite, I'll come, and we'll have a good time.
Oh, that sounds great. So for you, Professor Shelley, it is don't be intimidated. Ask, find send you an email, right? Offer the invitation. And for you, Professor Lee, it is I'm thinking about Shrek, the original version, where he says, "I'm like an onion." There are many layers that you get to peel through them. So take the time to actually get to know who you are, and not to just assume things based on what they see in one meeting. Recognize that you are a multifaceted person with many dimensions, and some of them you're still discovering. So take time to figure all of that out with you. Shout outs. If you had to shout out people, and this really goes back to the first question, who helped you get where you are? No man is an island. It was the title of a song, right? If you had to shout out the influential people in your life, who would they be? Those who helped you get to where you are.
That list, for me, that list is very, very, very long. If I start naming names, I'm going to get in trouble. But I mentioned two names before down at the Virginia, Ohio. They were my very first sort of formal voice teachers, and up until their death were just absolutely integral into developing my sort of vocal sensibility. I would say, spiritually, my spiritual formation starts at St. Paul's, but it actually it stays in this state. I spent some time as a member of Phillips Metropolitan CME Church in Hartford, Connecticut, where now Bishop James Bernard Walker was pastor. This was before he was bishop, and he's somebody who has been very, very important. Ministerial staff there, I am still very close to. I don't know if you know the name Lisa Clayton, Reverend Lisa Clayton. who is here in Connecticut, has been a friend for years and a constant for me. There are just so many people. I'm going to say it this way. I prayed years ago that, God, when I get to where you're taking me, I want it to be clear that no one else could have orchestrated this but you. And I really am living that right now, because strategically people have been placed in my path to help me along this journey. And I am grateful beyond words. In the gospel music space, I would say someone who has been a huge influence on my adult spiritual formation has been Hezekiah Walker, he was my pastor for 11 years. While I was a student at Juilliard, while I was, early on in my professional career. And so I'm sort of navigating these classical spaces, for being pastored by a Grammy Award-winning, gospel musician. And so that, that seeming disparate ideas, musical ideas, really kept me grounded at all times. And so I am grateful beyond words for all of these people. I could keep on naming them, but I leave it at that.
I agree with the good professor. The list is so long, I'm afraid to start. Nevertheless, I guess there are a couple folks I would be remiss to not name. I had a couple of important Black male professors at Duke. Anthony Kelly is a composer and theorist who was my principal mentor in undergrad. And I learned music analysis from him. He put up with me when I was trifling and when I was not. And he had the perfect balance of the carrot and the stick of high expectations and flexibility. There's no conceivable way my path would have been as positive without him. The late, great Professor Raymond Gavins, history professor, he was, I think he might have been the first Black person to get a PhD, certainly in history from the University of Virginia, but maybe from the graduate school period. And he is an old school grammarian. I thought I knew how to write when I came to Duke, but that man tortured and embarrassed. I mean, he would grade the paper line by line by hand, and you get back a paper that was just bleeding. He underlined, "This is not a sentence." Then, not good. Work harder, be smarter. He was petty too. Like, he was shade before we knew what a shade was. He would copy a copy of the Turabian citation guidelines and staple it to the back of your paper as he gave you back the paper to tell you that you didn't do the proper citations. After 3 semesters of taking his classes, I finally got an A- at the end. And he said, "This is a good paper." I thought I was Jesus when he accepted a paper of mine and said A-, good job. I was like, man, I can, I'm sorry there are no more worlds for me to conquer, I've done it. But I learned how to write from Gavins. The meticulous clarity, focus, I learned that from him. When I got to grad school, I was set, a lot of people in the PhD program, writing is the hard thing. And Gavin said, he beat that into me. I was set. I could learn some other stuff because I knew how to do a paper, a chapter, and a dissertation, and an article. And even now I think sometimes, what would Gavin's do? So when it came time to write the acknowledgments for my first book, he got a couple sentences. He died in 2016, actually, but he's there and praised. In the music world, a couple of people, Emmett Price, who was just named the Dean of Africana Studies at Berkeley. I met him in 2010, and he's been a mentor and friend and backer, like you wouldn't believe. sometimes, in this world, being a Black person in mostly white spaces, all white spaces except for you, sometimes you just need to vent. You don't need anybody to give you a sermon. You just mad. You need somebody to listen to you so you don't go do something stupid. So you can get it out. He knew when to do that. He knew when to chide me. He knew when to push. He knew when to make a phone call on my behalf, connect me to somebody. So Path is unimaginable without him. And then Dr. James Abington, who I met through the Hampton Ministers Conference in maybe 2009. Having grown up a Black, church music kid, I revered him. And I remember when I met him for the first time, I was like, oh, this guy talks to me like I'm a regular human, he just acts like a normal person. And he came that fall to do a workshop in Greensboro and called me on the phone. Said, I want to take you to lunch. I'm going to be in, can you come meet me in Greensboro? And he was like, you should go get in a good theory program since you're good at that. And go do this work. And of course, my mind was blown. I was like, this is James Abington talking to me at this lunch table, acting like I have some idea to contribute to the world. And he has been there without fail along the way. And that's, of course, just the tip of the iceberg. But name any more names, I'm going to get into more trouble. But to suffice it to say that the village is vast, and that I am grateful.
Well, I'm sure there are many more names that both of you could add. Professor Lee, did you want to say something else?
I did. So two things. One, Professor Shelley, I just want you to know that I am actually going to be working with Anthony Kelly this October at Duke on their spiritual symposium. So I'm glad that not only are our paths crossing, but your background and my present are also crossing. So that's pretty cool. The one thing I didn't mention in influential people, and I would be in trouble if I didn't, but it's my family. My mom and my immediate family, but also my extended family, who have been extremely supportive of my endeavors throughout my adult life. I come from a working class family, just good old hardworking Black folks. And here I was sort of, charting this course in classical music and doing things that nobody really could put their hands on what it was. And I had a hard time explaining to them what it was that I was doing, but I knew it was what I was supposed to be doing. And so for them to be able to support me through that, even during the times where I wasn't making any money, and just trying to make it, that having that kind of support is invaluable. Really, really invaluable. So I just wanted to clear that up.
I hear you, and that's why I think it's important for people to hear, to have some of these names called. It's impossible to call them all, but it's important to have people hear who the influences are, because sometimes people look at you in your profession, and like I said, they see the title, but they don't see the story. So this space is set aside to really help us to understand more about you, both of you, right? How you got here, how you've been created, and now we know you are industrious people, both of you, right? Projects here, projects there. So what's in your mind now? What are these current projects as you sit here looking at 2021, and you are both coming to Yale, and Albert is a classical musician, I know Albert is an opera singer, classical musician, good musician, period. We have Professor Braxton Shelley over here, rooted in gospel and theory and history and composition. What's now? What now? What are the projects? What are you all thinking about? What are these? I know you have many. Well, what's at the forefront of your mind?
I have a couple of projects that I'm working on. I'm trying to finish a book on the late Bishop Gilbert Earl Patterson. The title is An Eternal Pitch. Bishop G. Patterson and the Afterlife of Ecstasy. It's about Patterson's life, ministry, his afterlife, which if you're on Facebook or anywhere, you can't help but run across some of his really remarkable posthumous resonance. You know, he's been dead almost 15 years, and you might think Patterson was still alive. You know, Patterson still has a broadcast every Sunday on the Word Network at 4:00. And I am arguing that this reverberation is not accidental, but that he was interested in a kind of oracular omnipresence as he lived. Before he did his sermons, he would often pray that God would anoint his lips of clay, allowing them to speak as an oracle of Christ and not just a man. And some of the ways this preoccupation of his shows up are in his extraordinary musicality. And he's got some devices, some musical fragments that show up and get transformed across decades of his career. In fact, more often than not, his sermons in the last few seconds of his messages, he gets up to a single note. The tenor high B is at this great point in his voice that optimizes both effort and exertion, you know, giving you that real great gospel-y squall, you know, like you want that sound. And it's different. Some days he's in exceptional voice and he gets to a C, or some days he does a B flat, but both of those notes are inferior to that B. It just rings. It just has a quality to it. In fact, his last sermon, preached on Christmas Day 2006, he's dying of cancer. He preaches from a chair because he's too weak to stand and preach. But somehow, in the last 30 seconds of his preaching career, he gets back to that B. And that B is the last note of his preaching life. And so that's the eternal pitch. But I use that both as a real thing and as a metaphor for the kinds of musical repetition that shape his career and that penetrate his afterlife. Working on that, and I'm spending a lot of time on trying to do a serious program here in Music in the Black Church. We hope to have curricular offerings in a year or two. We'd like to have a concentration. You know, the ISM has the Div School, these Masters of Arts in Religion, and we'd like to have a Masters of Arts in Religion in Music in the Black Church in the next 2 years. We'd like to have, and we will have, you know, some programming starting in the fall under COVID restrictions. I can't describe exactly what it'll be yet, but there will be hopefully some big names and some serious conversations happening. But hopefully by the spring, by the last week in April, I'd like to do an inaugural symposium that will bring together church, academy, local audience, national performers, preachers, scholars, audiences, to really say to the world that Yale has a program in Music in the Black Church that is off the ground and running. And that'll be enough for this year.
Wow. Well, that's exciting. Now, I have one question. Was he in the key of B, or was he just singing the B?
So this is what is cool about it, is that he didn't have to be in B to get to B, right? Of course, you know, we who know music theory, the key is supposed to be more important than the pitch, right? Like the key is supposed to tell the pitchers what to do, right? Like they get their tendency and their magnetism comes from the key that they're in. But Patterson, this B is different. I'm telling you, that's why I wrote a book about it, because it didn't matter if he's preaching in B, he could be preaching in A flat, he could be preaching in D flat, he could be preaching in D, he could be preaching in E. He gonna get to that note. And so whether it's this transcendent tonic or blue third or blue seventh or whatever, he's going to get to that B whenever it makes sense. Now, if he's preaching in B flat, he's not going to do that because that'd be, a dissonance over what the band is doing. But whenever it made tonal sense, Patterson got there. And so that's what's so cool about it, is that if he just did it when he was preaching in B, it'd be cool, but it wouldn't be the same. But this note transcends keys, transcends sermons, transcends years, transcends life and afterlife. That's why I call it an eternal pitch.
Well, and I love the title. And of course, I'm thinking of it from the side of the band. What did they do with it? How did the band support that B?
Yeah, well, they could hear it coming, and he had other riffs that he would also do that they would look for. But the ensemble dynamic is really quite astounding. So, yeah, I'm having fun doing this book, and it almost feels like a guilty pleasure. Like, I can't believe I get to get paid to write a book about Patterson's final pitch. But it's so revealing about Black religious broadcasting, musicality of Black preaching, sort of improvisation. There's a whole lot of themes and topics that this specific case shines light on.
And that might be a whole nother show for us to do. Hooping versus hollering and how to back up the preacher. But that's a whole nother show.
Okay.
With a whole nother set of people to opine along with you. And that would be fascinating.
I'll be there.
Professor Lee, your project.
So, being that I kind of operate at this crossroads between, as a diversity, equity, inclusion practitioner, always operating at this crossroads of race and gender and sort of central to my portfolio at Yale in the School of Music. My projects sort of are as varied as my portfolio is. And so I actually just returned from Greece doing performances with a classical crossover group named Vox Fortura. And the group fuses both classical and soul. And so just finished several performances with them in Greece. And then this coming year, I have a mix of opera, spirituals, oratorio, in performance. And my long range project is developing a manuscript, a longer book that specifically looks at the role that Langston Hughes plays in the evolution and the presence of evolution of music in America, in the Americas in the 20th century. And the crossroads where he exists in between both the classical and the popular. His words, his influence, his unique way of creating rhythm in words is everywhere in both classical spaces and in more popular spaces. And so I'm actually teaching a class this semester titled "The Literary Voice of Langston Hughes in American Music Culture," that will look at that much more from the classical side, but it will absolutely cross over. So that is one of the big projects. The other big project is a recording project that I'm looking to do of both of composer Ricky Ian Gordon's song ciphers to Langston Hughes texts. I have performed one of them already, an excerpt from the second one, and the goal this year is to finish learning the second one and to record those next summer. So I am still singing, I am writing, I am leading, and we'll be doing all those things right here again.
Sounds exciting. And I'm interested in. I had time. I'd be interested in auditing your course on Langston Hughes. I know it sounds awful. Send me the syllabus. So maybe it's because I am who I am. I know it's because I am who I am. I'm excited about the work that both of you are doing. And to my knowledge, I've been in New Haven since 1994, and this level of scholarship in looking at things from a Black perspective, and I say that literally because that's really what it is. That there's a uniqueness to the Black voice, that all of us bring a perspective, and to pretend that it's not a Black one would be erroneous because we are Black people, right? It is certainly influenced by our training, but some of our perspective is inspired by what has spoken to us through the years. So there's no way to separate our being Black from our being academic because there's a lot of intersectionality. But I'm excited about the academic pieces that are coming out of this. Certainly the academic side of gospel music that has much more of a way to go in terms of its exploration, and the academic side of what it means to be a classical musician. I still don't see enough written about that, right? From the Black perspective of what I don't. It might be there, but not enough of it. So that's just my soapbox piece. So in moving to New Haven, or in Albert's case, coming back to New Haven, what are you hoping the community will do to support your work and your well-being? So what have you found to be helpful? What have you found to be surprising? And what do you still need from the community?
Well, I am notoriously slow when it comes to getting settled in a place. I have a place that's great, but I'm really slow typically at getting to know a town. And so what I look forward to is to getting to know the people who's will be naturally drawn to the work I'm trying to do. What I hope the community will do is get excited about this new program. And it's interesting, you know, and I think that there are often complicated relationships between institutions and communities, especially when, you know, there are questions of race and class and histories that are already in the air. And so coming into those things as an outsider will require some learning to get to know some of the background. But I hope that there can be a real anticipation about what is possible now in view of Yale's recent investments, our recent arrival, the broader context in the world and the academy. And so I hope that musicians, choir members, pastors, and, you know, regular music lovers will, you know, be all over this, trying to figure out what is going to happen, what can happen, offering advice about what should happen, and reaching out. We actually have an email set up, blacksacredmusic@yale.edu. It's already up and live. So anybody who has some idea they want to send in can jot us a note about something they might like to see. So that's that. I need a barbershop, as you can see. I've been, you know, I normally kind of, you know, deal with that every couple of weeks, but COVID still has me a little scared. So I do it a little bit less often. And now I'm in a new city, so I have to figure out where to go. I'm sure offline, maybe we'll get in the comments a lot of suggestions about that. Previously, I've always had a church job, and I'm really trying to pray and discern about the extent to which I have space to be at a church. I have been called by a number of places in Connecticut and in the surrounding states, but I would like just to get to know the church community. That's really important to get a feel for what's happening. I know that, you know, this moment of reentry and due to Delta variant, maybe reclosure makes it makes it more complicated. But I certainly just look forward to getting to know the people who know the places. I've been to Sandra's one time. Actually, they catered from Sandra's when I came here for recruitment dinner because they asked me what I wanted, and I said, "Does New Haven have soul food?" And then I went to Sandra's, and I was like, "You remember the guy that they were trying to recruit in the music department, and they catered from you? I'm the guy. Your food was so good, I decided to come to New Haven." So Sandra's my only black spot that I know of so far, and I know there are more black spots. So it'd be great to get some advice on that too, and just some positive notes of openness and excitement about what is possible now.
So I will say this. I left, Jonathan, you came to New Haven when I left New Haven. And I left New Haven and really vowed never to return because in some ways I didn't feel like I fit in here. What I was doing, what I was interested in, who I was, I didn't feel like I could be all of that here. I left looking for a place to fit in. And I don't know that I ever found a place that neatly could house all of me. And so here I find myself back in New Haven, in a sense, not looking to fit in anymore. And it's not about not fitting in New Haven. It's about not necessarily looking to fit into anyone's box or paradigm. And I'm comfortable with that now. And I'm excited about my own sort of individuality right now. And so I think what I would hope for the community is that they would open themselves up, that the community would open itself up to experiencing new and experiencing different and looking at things in a way that they may not have looked at it before. Having grown up here, I'm returning here really looking to discover the city anew. Sort of leaving my preconceived ideas about home behind and seeing the city from a very different vantage point as a professional move into a new place. I think when you grow up, working class, Black, in a particular place, you see the place from a certain lens, and I'm looking to sort of broaden my scope and vision of my own city. And so that's something that's really important to me. I too will need a barbershop. This beard needs regular work. And the barbershop of my youth is closed. So I've got to find some place else to go. I am a foodie. I love great restaurants. So somebody tell me, I know some of them, but I'm interested in understanding and learning the new ones. Professor Shelley, you should know that Sandra's has been around since I was a child. So they are a pillar in the community and still making good food. So that's a good thing. What else? I will say this, Professor Shelley, to you, there is a rich history of gospel music with connections to the gospel big time, if you will, right here in New Haven. And so I think I'm excited about your work because I think many people, I think we in New Haven have forgotten that history in large part, and the connections and the giants of the New Haven community from 20, 25 years ago and before. And I think those connections will help people see the work that you're doing and see the value in it. So we will talk soon about making some of those connections, because there are still some living legends right here in New Haven who really were amazing. The name that comes to mind off the top of my head is Lewis Gibson, who's just a pretty remarkable figure in the city at connecting us to life outside of New Haven and gospel music outside of New Haven. I'm excited to be home. I don't think I'd ever thought I would say that, but I'm excited to be home.
Well, I thank both of you for joining us this morning. I see that we have about 20 seconds left to wrap up. Professors Albert R. Lee and Braxton D. Shelley, welcome to New Haven. We have heard you. Thank you for sharing with us, excuse me, this morning, helping us to get to know more of your truth, who you are, and how we can better support you as a New Haven community. And all of you barbers, hit them up. You've heard the request. So I'm looking forward to your work here in New Haven. In any way that I can help you, please let me know. Thank you so much for this morning.
As I got another rhyme, another rhythm for y'all to listen. I'm never quitting on my mission. I'ma roll with what I'm giving. Got some ambition, this new edition, filling positions. Looking at the void in myself and feeling what's missing. Better watch the way you going, better go in the right direction. In the moment you stressing, but you gon' be counting blessings. And I know that for certain. Keep on working, open curtains, haters swerving, cause they ain't ready for your final version. Whoa. I'm never gonna give up, fall down, I just gotta get up, yeah.